What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk to you about NIO. I want to go over some expectations for this upcoming week, what might cause some volatility in the stock price, and go over everything else that you need to know. But first, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up, and with that, let's get right to it. So starting off with macro data, we don't really have too much this week. On Tuesday evening, we have inflation and PPI, so that of course will affect Chinese stocks come Wednesday. And then Friday, we have new sales or vehicle sales, new loans, and money supply. So that again could really impact Chinese stocks, but nothing really planned for any committee meetings, no trade talks with the states. So it is this week primarily going to be moved by algorithmic trading as well as NIO's own technicals, which so far it's kind of a hit and miss. So I'll go over some key levels that you really need to watch for. But when it comes down to algos, there's a lot of key data coming out from the states that could really move NIO in a positive way. So starting off on Monday, we don't really have that much. Tuesday, we have Jolt numbers, ADP, the weekly, but it's going to come down to Wednesday. So Wednesday, the interest rate decision. So most likely we're going to be getting a 25 basis point cut. I already kind of feel like the market's priced that in, but what Powell says afterwards and whether he alludes to a January cut, that is definitely going to move and impact the broader market. So don't be surprised if you see a lot of extra volatility on Wednesday, because as I mentioned, you're going to have Chinese stocks kind of digesting inflation, PPI, as well as algorithmic trading through what Powell does. So that's going to be a pretty interesting day. Companies unveiling their earnings. There's not really anything crazy or anything like that. Nothing really planned associated to NIO either for this upcoming week. So I think in general, everyone is just waiting to see if NIO can actually hit their targets for Q4. But aside from that, though, the only thing that kind of came out over the weekend is this right here. So battery supply is among the primary bottlenecks for NIO ES8 deliveries, which it looks like it is projected to ease in January 2026. So this one, it's going to be I don't really understand how the market's going to digest this, because it's kind of a negative, which was partially brought up in their most recent earnings, but it does give a deadline or a timeline when this is actually going to be easing. So January 2026. Market really does hate NIO. I think we all can kind of agree on that. So when it comes down to this, I feel like the algorithms and just generally the shorts are going to take this and run with it. That's just my opinion, of course. Hopefully I'm wrong and the market just completely disregards this, but this is kind of the only thing that came out over the weekend. So the market will most likely be really focusing on that. Then when it comes down to shorts, so going into this upcoming week, 11.28% of the free float is being shorted. Works out to be 156.18 million shares overall are being shorted. You still do see some sketchiness, so I don't like to ever wear the tinfoil hat and say mother of all short squeeze and blah blah blah, because yeah, it's very difficult to prove, especially naked shorting. But in this case, it does show shares on loan being 83.28 million. Number of shares being shorted, 156.18 million. So again, math doesn't really add up. So if you think about it, this technically does show some naked shorting. So do your own due diligence and all the other fun jazz. DTC being 2.24 days. So that also does signal that shorts are very overextended as well. So that does factor in the average volume for NIO in comparison to number of shares being shorted. Shorts on Friday did really try to get it to close below $5. Luckily enough, it did hold up, but still shorts did increase 750,000 shares. So anticipate them to be fairly active this week. And there's one thing as well I just wanted to kind of address, because I've seen a lot of comments on some of my videos as well as on Twitter, people saying like, what's up with shorts? Why are shorts still around NIO, whereas other Chinese EVs are sitting around the 4% range? I think in my kind of experience covering different stocks, one thing that shorts tend to focus on is any stock that has a high presence of retail. So if we kind of go down here, this is the ownership breakdown. So institutions work out to be about 22.53% of the outstanding shares. Corporations, public, private, individual / insiders, 7.1%, state-owned, 16.9%, and then public and other, aka retail, is sitting at 49.5%. So in general, this is why shorts target NIO is because retail. And unfortunately, as much as I love retail and stuff like that, technically they are very emotional. Most people, in fact. And I think you can actually even look at a lot of my comments as a good sign that retail is very emotional, because stock goes down 10%, they freak out. And which, yeah, in some cases, depending on if you're using margin, that 10% could be a big deal, but still, shorts try to trigger stop losses from retail, and they try to trigger margin calls. So it is because of this right here. That is exactly why just shorts are around NIO. Keep in mind, once any stock does head towards profitability, that is going to increase institutions' like attention and presence in that stock, which will obviously be a natural deterrent against shorts. That's just kind of the life cycle, in my opinion, of what does happen. So eventually you will see retail go down, institutions go up, and as well as a byproduct, shorts go down. So something, again, just to keep in mind. Looking at the options from a bull standpoint, you see a consensus for it to be roughly around 550 by the end of the week. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub 450. So you kind of have, with us closing at 504, pretty level ground. This is the open interest. So with it closing at 504, you have 13,000 at that 5, 19,000 at the 550. So 550 and above did expire worthless. So you could see a little bit of a pop come Monday, as market makers will have to cover that. You did see some abnormal transactions after hours on Friday, so potentially that could be some linkage to market makers. On a side note, aside from that though, looking forward into this upcoming week, you have 7,000 at that 5, 14,000 at that 550, 10,000 at that 6. So just kind of keep in mind that shorts like to have most of this expire worthless. So by the end of this upcoming week, if let's say NIO is floating around that 550 or 5, you could see shorts try to hit it hard. No different than what happened technically on Friday. Just luckily enough, they did fail. But this week is going to be a big deal for technicals. So right now, looking at the 4-hour chart with it at 504, it is trading between this S2 and this S3. 499 is going to be that key point. You really want to watch for that to hold early on in the week. And then flip side, 521. So it kind of bounced off of that general area on Friday. So we know that's a key resistance level. And then 534. Quickly popping over to the 1-day chart though. This is where it's going to be the line in the sand, this S2. And luckily enough, in my opinion, that's one of the main things why NIO actually started to move higher ever since I think it was on Wednesday when it hit this S2. So 473, that is going to be a very, very strong support. And again, like I said, it did bounce off of that. So just watch for that to hold. If not, it could be more of a falling off of a cliff type of scenario, because then 387 would be the following support level. So at the end of the day, just kind of watch for a lot of those. And as I've mentioned, just dollar cost average. That seems to be the best thing to do with NIO. Very difficult to kind of catch the highs as well as the lows. But if you dollar cost average, it usually does work out kind of level ground. Because of the consolidation that did happen, it landed exactly on this 200-day moving average, so that's kind of a good thing. So another element to somewhat watch for it to hold is at 503. But overall, it's like if it does break below that 200-day moving average, then you're going to see a nice, no, I wouldn't say nice actually, but a continued consolidation period. A lot of individuals, if you pop over to Twitter, are drawing all these kind of weird charts just saying that NIO is going to pretty much go to like $16 from here. I don't see that being on the table whatsoever. So in my opinion, especially early on in the week, it needs to really stay above that 200-day moving average, because you need 2 consecutive days above or below a moving average to really signal kind of a trend. And ideally, it does get above that 10-day moving average, and it hasn't actually closed above that since November the 5th, which is crazy. So one solid month of absolute bloodbath for NIO. So as I've said, NIO, like Wall Street just hates NIO as per usual, but this is a little bit overboard if you ask me. So in my opinion, I think NIO really does want to move higher. So hopefully this momentum does really continue. One thing to watch for is going to be that 10-day moving average. So if it can get above that, then you'll really know that momentum is going to continue to kind of push it higher to potentially that 100-day moving average. So let me know your thoughts on NIO and where you realistically see things going by the end of this week. In my opinion, I do feel that we will be closing somewhere between this pivot and this S1, most likely right above this S1 of that 526. So a little bit of a recovery, but nothing significant in my opinion. So let me know your viewpoint. And then one final thing, pop over to my Patreon if you're looking for some solid buy signals on stocks, options, crypto. Put out daily day trades, numerous swing trades. Worthwhile to pop over there and check that out. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.